right. Well, welcome back to Philosophy for Flourishing, the show where we explore principles and practices for living the best, most fulfilled life possible. Today, we're going to talk about moral character in flourishing. And I'm joined by Larry Reed, President Emeritus of Foundation for Economic Education, President Emeritus of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, and author of several books, including Excuse Me, Professor, Challenging the Myths of Progressivism, A Republic If We Can Keep It. Love that title. Benjamin Franklin's one of my favorites. Real Heroes. This is an excellent book. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for all of these. But this one, I was until recently co-hosting a podcast called The Hero Show with my friend Andrew Bernstein, who I think is a mutual friend of ours.
Yes.
And several times, we were inspired by people that you profiled in here to do them on The Hero Show. So thanks so much for joining me. This is such a pleasure to have you.
Hey, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and I appreciate the invitation very much.
Well, we're going to talk about moral character today. And I know that this subject is very important to you. It's definitely something that you highlight in your profiles of the heroes that you've done, both in this book and also at Foundation for Economic Education, the blog that they have there. FEE's mission. So I know that you're the president emeritus of FEE. You're no longer there working day to day, but you were there for a long time. And I think we have this common point here that currently I'm a Hazlitt Fellow at Foundation for Economic Education, which is actually how we met. And FEE's mission, I just want to bring it up here because it talks about moral character. And I think it's a good segue into our topic for today. It says, FEE's mission is to inspire, educate, and connect future leaders with the economic, ethical, and legal principles of a free society. These principles include individual liberty, free market economics, entrepreneurship, private property, high moral character, and limited government. And I really think, among other things, you really can't live a flourishing life if you're a bad human being, particularly if you know that you're not a good person, because even if you suspect it, you're going to have this feeling of guilt that sort of wreaks havoc on your life and your happiness. How did this become central to FEE and to your life?
Well, Leonard Reed, no relation to me, the founder of the Foundation for Economic Education, certainly stressed the importance of a moral life as being integral to a free society. Maybe during the time I served as president of FEE, I sort of brought that to the fore and emphasized it once again, maybe even a bit more strongly than Leonard did himself. But that's always been a part of FEE's message. Leonard firmly believed that a society of dishonest or unhumble, arrogant, condescending people, a society of irresponsible or timid or dependent people who look to politics instead of their own initiative, a society has to have those positive virtues and avoid the negative ones if it expects to be free. He didn't think that liberty was something that could just happen irrespective of the moral character of the people, that the two were intertwined. And I believe that very strongly too. In fact, looking at the course of history, I'm hard pressed to identify a single country or civilization that kept its liberties if it first lost its character. I think you lose one, you lose the other. They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, this was actually, obviously, this was a topic of consideration among the American founders. And although John Adams put it, we want a government of laws and not of men, he still recognized that you needed men of high moral character in government in particular. And, he had sort of a kooky, weird means of trying to get more people of moral character into the government. He wanted to give them very highfalutin titles, thinking that this would attract people of ambition into the government. And that didn't go over, but his idea nonetheless holds water, right? I mean, we need people that are moral in positions of leadership. We need people that are moral in general, but definitely at the helm, right? I mean, this is
Yeah, yeah. It should be self-evident, but it isn't to a lot of people. But Adams and most of, if not all, of America's founders really believe that if you're personally corrupt in your private life, you're probably not going to be an upstanding citizen in your public life. And that what you want in government, first of all, is a small government, but you want one that is populated by people who have such things as respect for the lives and the choices and the contracts of other people. You want people in government who are willing to speak truth to power. You want people who are dedicated to something other than the aggrandizement of personal power while they're in government. You want people who are honest in their dealings, who are farsighted, who think of the long run, not just the short run, and who think of all people, not just a few. And that those last couple of points, John, you'll recognize as having been very important to Henry Hazlitt, since you're a Hazlitt Fellow. Hazlitt understood that farsightedness, an eye towards the future, is one of the elements of good character that a free society requires.
Yeah, this was also key, just to mention another founder, my favorite, Benjamin Franklin. I mean, he understood really that moral character, that morality is absolutely integral to living a good and happy life. It's
Yeah.
not that you just have to do these things for no good reason, that these things are arbitrarily pulled out of the sky, but it's that these things actually have a connection to living well and being fulfilled.
Yeah, except for the handful of people you could label sociopaths because their conscience is lacking. People, I think, flourish to the extent that they have a positive attitude toward life and view others with respect, who try to deal with others in a voluntary, mutually beneficial way, who value such things as honesty and responsibility. A lot of people have asked me, sometimes regardless of the topic that I've been asked to speak about, they ask me, what do you think is the most important issue in America today? And I welcome that question because it gives me a chance to say that the most important issue is not probably what you're thinking. A lot of people expect you to say, oh, it's government spending or the national debt or opioids or crime or COVID, you name it. All of those are important issues, but I like to say the most important issue in America today and everywhere and at all times is personal character and the general level or caliber of it among the people, because everything else flows from it. That's how important it is. If you don't get that right, if a people don't get their character right, then it almost doesn't matter what their public policies are, because they're going to be harmful and they will not be a great people and not be a free people.
I love that observation. And, I didn't get the opportunity to ask the question, but I'm glad that you brought it up. So as someone who's interested in flourishing, personally, I'm interested in building moral character, and I regard that as an active process.
Yeah.
I think that you really build your character. It's not that you're born with it and you have no choice and no say in how you are as a person. As Ayn Rand really memorably put it, we are beings of self-made soul, and we can really build that character. So, so I have some ideas on this subject, but I'd love to hear from you about building moral character and sort of some of the standing orders, if you will, that you can give yourself to, or maybe other techniques that you've come across, things that you can do to help yourself become the own image of your own moral ideal in life.
Okay. There are a lot of things over which we as individuals have little or no control. You don't have any control over who your parents were, where you were born, what color you are, those kinds of things. But you do have control over your personal character at some point in life. Certainly when you reach adulthood, at that point, if not before, you are in command of what kind of person you're going to be. And I think whenever we as lovers of liberty recommend things to read to people, I get that question all the time too. What should I have my child read, or what should I read? Of course, the classics of classical liberalism come to mind, and certainly more recent authors like Henry Hazlitt and Frederick Bastiat, Adam Smith, and so many others are among those we recommend. But I like to also say, focus some time and attention on self-improvement, because in the long run, the character of yourself that you mold yourself is going to determine so much in life. It's even going to have a lot of say in how long you live. I remember reading a book by a guy named Emmons, a bioethicist, and his whole focus of the book was on gratitude. And he pointed out that through the study of the team of bioethicists that he put together, they decided that a grateful spirit, that is recognizing that at least some of the good things that happen to you are not of your own doing. They came about because of other things, other people. A grateful spirit can add as much as 7 years to your life. You look around today and you find so many people, particularly of the left, if I may use that phrase, of the statist
You may.
persuasion, who want to put government in charge of their life. They often are angry people. They're always looking for victims. Everybody's either a victim or a exploiter. And they, of course, if you give them power, promise to be our saviors. That's just no way to live life. There are so many things all around us that we should be awestruck about. And not the least of which is how marvelous the market mechanism is. And Leonard Reed of Fee and others have noted this. Leonard, with his essay, I Pencil, was famous for pointing out that something as simple as a pencil that we so take for granted is really the result of a marvelous, unplanned melody or harmony of interests, of people coming together in a marketplace, not because they know you or like you. They're from all over the world. I don't even know who you are, but they know that to serve themselves, they have to serve you. So they develop the skills that they have, they work peaceably with others, and the result is the production of everything from pencils to jet airplanes. And no government, no politician is mandating that. It happens because that's what free and innovative people of character do. So I see character development as very much a personal mission, and it's a never-ending one. If somebody told me, okay, I've got that solved, I'm as good a person as I can possibly be, my character is at its zenith and can't get any better, I say, nonsense. You need to sit down and read another self-improvement book, because I can guarantee you there's more room for improvement. So before we try to reform the world, which so many people seem to be preoccupied with, we need to be focused on improving ourselves. And if we accomplish that, we will, by definition, have reformed the world.
And live longer.
Yeah.
As you brought up Emmons. So I know that some of his work is very good, and some is somewhat questionable. I think there is a lot in this idea of extending your own life via the sort of experience that you have in life.
Yeah.
So the sort of grateful experience. Earlier, when we started talking, I mentioned that I think that guilt is a real killer, both of human flourishing, but I think it's also a real killer just of humans in general. We blame so many things on stress, gray hair, this and that. Well, I think if we analyze stress and we analyze the sort of life that really grinds people down, it's when they feel guilt over something in their own lives by their own standards. And so I think that, among other things, one thing that we should really strive for all the time is just real clarity about what it means to be good, real clarity about moral concepts like pride, ambition, honesty, integrity, virtue in general.
Yeah, you're right about guilt. It is a nasty thing, unless, of course, you're guilty. But there are a lot of people who look upon others and judge them guilty when, in fact, they're guilty of nothing more than being successful. I mean, you see the left all the time is angry at people for no other quote sin than being successful in life and having lots of happy customers and creating wealth in the process. There's no reason to feel guilty about that. But if you've harmed others, if you've lied to them, if you've taken from them, if you've deprived them of their rights without a good reason, then yeah, you're guilty and you probably ought to feel it. But then repent and quit doing it, and
Right.
then feel good about life and go about doing things that are helpful to yourself and to others at the same time.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. So it's certainly not the case that no one should feel guilt, but you should live a life that does not incur guilt. And it should be based on, as you're pointing out, there are many people who feel guilty about things that they shouldn't because they're doing things that are in support of human life.
Yeah.
And if we consider life and human flourishing as a good, then these people are not guilty. They're not doing anything wrong, and they should not feel guilt for it.
Yeah, you know, related to this, one of my pet peeves for a long time has been when a donor to FEE or before that to the Mackinac Center says something like, well, I'm giving because I want to give back. And I usually smile and try to find a pleasant way to disabuse them of some misconceptions in there, because the implication of saying I'm a philanthropist because I want to give back, the implication there is that you took something that didn't belong to you, or that you wouldn't be as good a person if you had chosen not to give. But if you haven't committed any kind of crime against anybody, if you just simply are a successful person who's created wealth and made a lot of people happy, don't feel as though you have to give back. You've already given more than most people might do in their entire lives. So yeah, I don't like to hear that. The people who should give back are not those who have peacefully created something and served customers. The people who should give back are, you know, politicians who stole it in the first place, or common thieves, or you know, people who have harmed others, not those who have made our lives more pleasant.
Yeah, these people with trillion-dollar budgets ought to be thinking about giving back.
Yeah.
Not the people that are making all this money that is then being taxed to support this thing involuntarily.
Exactly. Yeah, get rid of the guilt complex. You'll be a happier person and a more accurate one too.
So moral ambition. This is another concept that I take from Ayn Rand. She talked about, so Aristotle talked about pride being the crown of the virtues. It's what the moral man feels as a result of that moral character, having built that moral character. And Rand called it the crown of the virtues. Rand called pride moral ambitiousness. And I love this concept because it pulls together this idea of really striving towards self-perfection with morality. And one of the things that I think we share in terms of our outlook on helping to build moral character is learning from exemplars. You know, I brought up your Real Heroes book, The Hero Show. One of the things that I love writing profiles of heroes, and I know you do as well. So there are just so many exemplars out there that we can look to, right? And we can say like, okay, well, one of my favorites, for instance, is John Stark. And he's famous for having come up with New Hampshire's state motto, live free or die. Death is not the worst of evils. And just thinking, okay, if I'm in a situation where I'm not sure what to do, like what would John Stark do? He's like one of the most independent, incredible people in history. I think he would do this. And then I gain this sort of clarity. So I'm wondering, like, how much of your attraction toward heroes comes from that same impetus, and who are some of the heroes that you find yourself looking to?
Well, you started with your mention of pride, and I have a couple thoughts on that. One is certainly if you are successful peacefully in a marketplace because you've invented, innovated, created, traded freely, and improved the lives of others, if you're exceptional in the application of your talents, you speak truth to power, and all of the sorts of things I talked about in Real Heroes, well then, yeah, you have every reason to feel pride. But I always tell people at the same time, uh, there's something to be said for making sure your pride doesn't carry you over to being boastful about it. In other words,
Hubris, boastfulness, agreed. Yeah.
hubris, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
kind of person who might say, well, look what I've done, I'm better than you.
Hmm.
Uh, in the long run, that's kind of self-defeating because it doesn't wear well with others. So you shouldn't have to put somebody else down in order to feel good about yourself. Focus on your achievements and your accomplishments. That should be the source of pride, not the fact that you are better than somebody else.
Hmm.
Um, so I wanted to mention that, but now I've forgotten more
Oh, the
specifically.
hero's point. But
Oh
you
yeah.
brought up such a good point here, and I think we should stay on it for just a minute because, like, when we're talking about pride, pride is something internal. It's
Mhm.
your own evaluation of yourself, and
Yeah.
it's not comparative at all. That's a very sort of that sort of social motive of, oh, I'm better than this other person. I don't really even regard that as pride. And boastfulness, I don't really regard as pride. Typically, those are symptoms of people that have low self-regard and look for
Yeah.
ways to try to raise themselves in the eyes of others. And that's really the opposite of what I'm talking about here. But yeah,
Yeah.
so no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, a person of character, if he or she took a moment to think about what would I want my headstone to say, if you had a lot of room on it to write a lot of things, I think you'd want to be able to say, of course I wasn't perfect because I was human, but once I knew what the right thing to do was, I tried my very best to adhere to that. I tried to treat others with the respect they deserve. I tried to liberate humanity, not to shackle it in any way. I tried to add value so that the world would be better off for my having been in it. And fill in the specifics. I invented this, I created that, I helped this person to achieve their potential. A lot of ways in which good character manifests itself, but that's what you'd want to be able to say. People wouldn't care much for you, I think, no matter what you did, if your epitaph was he boasted that he was better than others. I mean, so what, so don't do that.
Right. And don't think about what other people are going to think about you. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's on your headstone, I mean, like, yeah, there's something to think about. Okay, well, how do I want to be seen by the world after I'm gone? But also, the reason that, at least the reason that I think about morality here, is because it's so important. It's so crucial to your personal happiness and flourishing in life.
Yeah.
And you're not going to live a great life if you're walking around with this, your own evaluation of yourself is very, very low, and you
Yeah.
feel low self-confidence, low self-esteem. You're going to be sort of depressed, and that's the opposite of what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, if a person focuses on achievement and productivity and success in uh, the marketplace, things like that, being a good person towards others, I think the self-esteem will follow, and then it's certainly deserved and maybe more lasting. But if you have low self-esteem, either you haven't done the things that are deserving of self-esteem, or you have and you just simply underappreciate what you've done. So,
Mm-hmm.
but in either case, good self-esteem really should flow from what you've actually accomplished in life, what you've done with the talents that you have.
Yeah, totally. So let's bring this back around to some of our exemplars of virtue. I mentioned a couple, Benjamin Franklin and John Stark are people that I think about often. But I know that you have a whole list of your own. I'd love to hear some of them and some of the reasons that you find yourself coming back to them and thinking about their examples.
Okay. Well, one of the virtues I think that are important, or that is important to a free and prosperous society, is courage. And the reason for that is we live in a world that demands it if you want to be free, because there are a lot of people who will be happy to take your freedoms from you for their own personal selfish advantage if they thought they could get away with it. So people who believe in freedom, I think, cannot be timid. They have to be assertive. They have to defend freedom against all comers. Sometimes that means even putting their life on the line in order that freedom lives. And one of my great heroes, somebody that I regard as perhaps the bravest, most courageous person I have ever come across. I didn't meet him. He was killed in 1948, but I did meet his son, who is still living. His name was Witold Pilecki. Witold Pilecki. He was Polish. He fought against the Russians at the end of World War I. The Russians under Lenin were trying to retake Poland, which had just appeared on the map for the first time in 123 years. He fought valiantly and was decorated for that successful effort to repel the Russians who were trying to end the brief experiment in Polish liberty. And then when Hitler invaded in 1939, and 2 weeks later, Stalin invaded Poland from the other direction, Pilecki said goodbye to his wife and family and went underground and started fighting Nazis and communists. And then within a couple of years, it was apparent to the Poles that something big was going on at this place called Auschwitz that the Germans had constructed. And they needed to get somebody on the inside to find out what was going on and tell the world about it. And it was Pilecki, who we don't know of any other person who did this, who volunteered to be the guy who would get arrested by the Germans and hope that they'd send him to Auschwitz so that he could hopefully create some kind of internal resistance. Well, he did. And for a couple of years inside Auschwitz, he and a team of other inmates that he had befriended, they were stealing documents, getting them smuggled out. They even for 6 months broadcast on an illicit radio that they had constructed from just raw materials in the camp. And the combination of his reports, his radio transmissions, became known as Witold's Report, the most comprehensive on-site eyewitness account of what was happening in that notorious Nazi concentration camp. Now, if he had done nothing else in life, you'd have to say, wow, that's one courageous person. Just imagine what it was like to live inside Auschwitz as an inmate. Your life could be snuffed out at any moment. And the Nazis were getting indications that there was something, some kind of resistance going on, and some stuff was disappearing and so forth. So they started to get close to Witold himself when he realized he had to escape. And so he did something that only a few dozens of people ever successfully did, and that was to escape from Auschwitz. And then he joined the Polish resistance again, fought at the Battle of Warsaw, was captured by the Germans, but because he didn't bear the mark that would have been branded on him at Auschwitz if he had been Jewish, they didn't put two and two together, realize who he was and what he had done at Auschwitz. So he spent the last days of the war in a German prisoner of war camp, after which the Polish army sent him to Italy. And the war was over by that time, mid-1945. And the Poles began to realize, wow, the Russians, who had overrun Poland in the effort to defeat Germany, were not going to leave Poland. And they needed somebody on the inside to now spy on the Soviets. Well, who better but Witold Pilecki? So now for the next 2 years, he's enlisted as a spy to go back into his own country and spy on the Soviets. Which he did for 2 years until his cover was blown. He was put on a show trial and ultimately executed. But for the next, until the communists were kicked out in 1989, it was illegal for the Polish people even to mention his name in public. Now you'd think, well, wouldn't the communists have loved to have made a hero of a man who resisted the Nazis? Well, yeah, but he also resisted the communists, and they didn't want anybody to know about that. So it's only been since 1989 that his legacy has been well known. And today in Poland, everybody knows who Witold Pilecki was, one of the bravest people in the history of the world.
Is there a movie about him? I mean, there
was one underway. When I interviewed his son, Andres, just a few years ago. It was in its early stage of filming, but I haven't been able to find out why it hasn't come out. So there have been Polish films made, but none yet in English, to my knowledge.
Wow, that's such an incredible story. And
Yeah.
it calls to mind. Have you seen the movie? What is it, Pimpernel Smith with Leslie
No.
Howard?
Uh-uh.
No, well, it's a well, he had a very good career in Hollywood, but left during World War II to go back to England
Mhm.
to make propaganda for the British. Of course, there's nothing wrong with making propaganda against the Nazis. And they recreated the Scarlet Pimpernel story, the story of the Reign of Terror in France, using using Nazi Germany instead. And it's
Ah,
just it's just this incredible story of brain over brawn, and highly recommend it. You reminded me of it, telling me about Witold Pilecki
oh, I'd love to
and
see
the
it. It was,
story.
I remember Leslie Howard, great British actor. I think he was in Bridge Over the River Kwai, if I remember correctly. But in any event, what it was called
Pimpernel Smith.
Pimpernel Smith. Okay,
Yep.
yeah, I will look that up for sure.
Yeah, there ought to be something about Witold Pilecki. Let's figure that out. Let's
Yeah,
let's
yeah, he
put
really
some
deserves it.
money behind that project or whatever we can do. That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
I'm also reminded of a hero that I think I learned about from your book, uh, Duchess of Athol, Catherine Athol. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Standing on principle against dictators. So,
Yeah, she was terrific. Winston Churchill gets the lion's share of the credit for Britain mustering the backbone to resist the Nazis, starting from his role as a member of parliament of the ruling party, the Conservative Party, and in opposition to the policy of appeasement of Neville Chamberlain. But what is far less well known is the fact that it was this woman, the Duchess of Athol, who had to stiffen Churchill's spine. She was the first to sit down with him and say, "You need to read this book." And the book she was referring to was Hitler's Mein Kampf. And this was early 30s. And
mhm.
she said, "This guy aims to come to power and take over Europe and wipe out the Jews and do all kinds of nasty stuff." And Churchill listened and gradually came to realize, hey, she's right. But she also famously took on the Soviets. She wrote a book, I think, in 1932, which you could still get. I have a copy of it, which was a damning indictment of the Stalinist regime. She pointed out that, hey, this guy's killing people by the millions, confiscating their property and exiling them to gulags. And before Alexander Solzhenitsyn would write about the gulag from the inside, she was trying to tell the world that one was underway
Mm.
across the Soviet Empire.
Yeah, that is early 30s, and it wasn't until 1936 that Ayn Rand would release We the Living to tell the story of what was happening in Russia from the perspective of a Russian, and Solzhenitsyn was later. So this is she is very prescient in seeing in writing what people are saying they're going to do, seeing what their intentions
Yeah.
are, and then
Mhm.
taking them at their word and
Yeah.
acting on that knowledge to do something about it. That is incredible. And
Yeah. So many people uh, are gripped with a kind of naivete. They're sold by rhetoric. And if people say, "Oh, we have a great vision for a new society, and we're going to do this and that, we're going to help people and give them this and so forth," there are a lot of people who get suckered in by the rhetoric. But the Duchess of Athol said, she basically felt that, "I don't care what you say. I want to know what you're doing."
yeah, and again, like we can read about things that are going on in other countries in Venezuela, but very few people take up the sword of liberty, if you will, metaphorically. Perhaps there are times to pick up the real sword, but very few people act on that and see what the long-term consequences of that are, and really, press others to move policy in the right direction, such
Yeah.
that people are not being steamrolled by their governments.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a crucial point that too many people don't look at the long run. I've tried to drive this point home with audiences, and one way that I've found to be fairly effective is to say to them, I wish I could go back to ancient Rome. if I only had an hour and it was, say, late in the Roman Republic with its liberties fading fast and soon to give way to the imperial autocracy of the empire, what would I say in that hour to Romans who were in the process of losing their republic? I'd love to be able to say to them, hey, folks, I come from the future, and I want you to know where all this that you're now doing is going to lead. When the Roman Senate and the popular assemblies promise you these handouts, as they've been doing at that point for 100 years, too many of you think that, oh, isn't this great? We're going to get freebies. But let me tell you that that is a poison that is undermining the values of the republic. And the politicians that you are grateful to are the ones who are demagogically buying your support with your own money. And if you allow this to continue, the concentration of power in their hands will be one of the most corrupting, toxic influences ever. And you're just simply inviting tyranny. That's the end result here. So I can tell you from the future that unless my crystal ball, my reverse crystal ball is inaccurate, you folks won't get that point, and you're going to slide into tyranny. And you'll think that, isn't this a wonderful thing because I'm getting all these goodies? And before long, both your liberties and your civilization will be extinct. And we'll be learning about you in history books as something that isn't around anymore. Now, do you still want to do all that stuff? That's what I would love to tell them. Just give them a glimpse of where the future is heading and see if all these promised goodies are really worth the extinction of their civilization.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to go back just as a reporter and sort of learn about the moral character of the Romans to see what connections we can draw here. But it does. My intuition is that in many cases like this, when you lose within a society at large, you lose that long-term thinking. Mm-hmm. What sets in is this sort of whim worship, which is, I think, really the opposite of morality, the opposite of moral character. Moral character, as Aristotle talks about in the Nicomachean Ethics, is active state of the soul, something that actually requires a lot of effort, a lot of thought and effort. And it's easy to fall into the sort of effortless, well, handouts, this stuff sounds good. It's Christmas every day. It's easy to fall into that. On the other side, it's difficult. I think it's an actual job to build moral character. That's why we need moral ambition. That's why we need to think about building our character.
And that's so true of so many things, isn't it? That what is truly worthwhile often doesn't come easily. That it's the result of effort and sometimes sacrifice on behalf of the values that you hold dear. It often means having to say no to temptations in the current day that can prove disastrous in the long run. It's an ongoing issue from the beginning of time, I think. The tendency to want to look at the here and now, what strikes the eye, for the moment, and ignore tomorrow's consequences. And it's a fatal flaw. It's a sign of character that you've grown up enough to look at the long run. It's a sign of that you haven't grown up when you don't do that. Think of it this way. In a lot of respects, say a socialist, a progressive, the ones who want to forfeit the future for present benefits and are willing to concentrate power, they're sort of like babies in the sense that, what does a baby do? A baby wants stuff and doesn't care where it comes from or who pays for it. He wants it now and he's going to scream and holler if he doesn't get it. And but at some point we should grow out of that. And that means, among other things, becoming an adult and recognizing that, hey, if I have to steal from other people to get that, well, then maybe I ought to think twice about it. Maybe, why is that a good thing? Why can't they come and steal it from me if it's okay for me to steal it from them? Adults think about such things, but a lot of people just don't grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much, and it does require effort and does require growth and maturity and development as a person, very much like building muscles.
Yeah,
And when you stop attempting to build your muscles, they atrophy. It's not something that you get to a certain age and a light bulb goes on and then
yeah.
you've got your character. Thomas Reid, a Scottish Enlightenment philosopher, talked a lot about morality, and he said that what it requires is the ability to look at the long range consequences, the longest range that you can possibly think of, and all of the ramifications of a given action, and then to take the things that are in your long-term self-interest. And this is a point that Ayn Rand makes as well. She talks about rational self-interest and egoism, and I think this is true, that you need the ability to look at, okay, well, what are all the consequences of this? Maybe I feel like being the next Bernie Madoff and doing this pyramid scheme because, well, in the short term, it seems really great. But then what happened to him? What did his life turn into? It was a mess. And he, died in misery because he didn't think about the long-term consequences. And I think that Reed and Rand were both right on this point, that moral character and morality requires this very vast view of what is good for your life on the whole, and then to act on that.
Oh, sure, sure does. Well said. I don't think a people can be free in a political, social, economic context. I don't think freedom is possible if people indulge themselves only in what seems to work for the short run, irrespective of what it does to all people in the longer run. Focusing on the long run is a critical element in a free society, and an indication of solid character. It's the short run, here and now, only me, the heck with others, even if I have to use the state to steal from them, that is at the root of so much mischief and poverty in society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and these things I think are to some extent well dramatized in Pimpernel Smith. So I hope you'll check that out. It's such a
Yeah,
good
I'm
movie.
always looking for good movies.
Yeah, he talks about, the role of the mind in life, and how values and civilization and progress depend on the hands and the brains of exceptional people.
Yeah,
And this, of course, requires long-term thinking, and we don't want to see those values be destroyed.
yeah. Since you've recommended a movie, let me throw one out to you and to your viewers. I just saw it about 2 weeks ago, and it was fantastic. Didn't have a political agenda in any way, but I saw it as a tribute to the human spirit. The only point where it actually dealt with a current topic or issue was when it said some really terrific things about homeschooling. So I liked it even
Nice.
more for that reason. But the movie's called The Alpinist, Alpinist, and
Oh,
it's about this young Canadian named Marc-Andre Leclerc, who just became, on his own, self-taught, one of the most remarkable mountain climbers in all of history. And I don't want to give away too much, but it's stunningly scenic. And if you've got your eyes and ears open, you'll see it not only as a wonderful mountain climbing documentary, but you'll see it as a tribute to the human spirit of people wanting to live their lives peaceably and as they choose, not as somebody else would dictate to them. So The Alpinist, I thought it was terrific.
that sounds beautiful. I'll definitely check that out. So this has been such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on Philosophy for Flourishing. And I hope to have you back at some point in the future. There's so much more to talk about, and you're such a wealth of wisdom. So
Anytime, John, you know how to reach me, and your viewers know that we have a website at fee.org. They may not know that I also have my own, which is lawrencewreed.com.
excellent. We'll put that in the show notes along with links to the shows, the movies that we talked about, the books, all the good stuff that I can think of to add in there. We'll have links to. So
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone for tuning in to Philosophy for Flourishing. I hope that you are enjoying the show. Make sure to give us a rating and Until next time, happy flourishing.